everyone to This Week in Svelte episode 138. Sorry, I'm being a bit late, but I was working for you. I'm joking. I was trying to figure out, I think there's some new changes in the open code plugin surface, and that broke the Svelte plugin. And I was trying to fix it, but it's fine. All right. Thank you for joining. And let's jump right into the changelog again today. I don't know why, but recently there's not much libraries being released and stuff like that. So we'll see. Okay, let's start from Svelte 5.55.2 3 days ago. Fix invalidate const tag based on visible reference in legacy mode. So in legacy mode, basically const tags, as the rest of the reactivity in Svelte, were derived by whatever, like what you see in the template, what the compiler could see in the template. And it was not happening for const tag in legacy mode, and now it is. So now const tags are basically invalidated based on what the compiler can see. This is a fix to the parser. So in the template expression, the parser now can handle parentheses in a better ways. Disallow -- in ID prefix. So ID prefix is the prefix of when you're doing props ID, you can also specify what should be the prefix. So just to show you, I don't think in the playground you can in any way do it, but if I have props ID, const ID is equal $props ID, and I print the ID, you see that I have C6, in this case C9, C1 for this. And this is basically the props ID, for those who are unaware, is basically a way for every component to have its own, every component instance to have its own ID. But the nice part is that it's also stable between the server and the client. So if you server-side render this component, it is server-side rendered in a way that when you then hydrate the component on the client, you will get the same value from the server on the client. And obviously, not everyone needs to customize the prefix of this, but sometimes, I think we introduced the prefix because, for example, something like Astro that integrate with Svelte needs to be able to tell different island that have different props ID. Two different components in different islands should have different ID. And so we introduced the ID prefix, which it's a way so that instead of seeing C1, you could see something like Svelte Island 1, for example. And that's fine, but when, how it works, I don't think it will show up here. But basically how it works is that when you server-side render a component with props ID, it will store the ID inside the iteration tags. Let me see if I can. No, I don't think I can show you. I don't think I can show it to you. I guess maybe I can do from Svelte/server. Yeah, I cannot load node async. It's fine. It's fine. I cannot show it to you here. But it's fine. The point is that a server-side render component which has a props ID will have a comment, an HTML comment that looks something like this. You have this, and then you have something like, if I'm not mistaken, it looks something like C1, actually S1, which will be the server component. And then on the client, we read these and we say, oh, you are looking at this component. Like this component on the server had the ID of S1, so when you call props ID, I will actually return S1 as well. The problem was that up until this moment, you could technically shoot yourself in the foot, and that if you, for some reason, were dynamically setting the props ID, I don't know why would you do that. Someone could technically set the prefix ID to something like --this, and this will basically break the whole thing because it will close the comment and like expose the rest of the comment like this. So it was an annoyance. So I mean, there's really no reason for you to really want to have ---- on ID prefix, and so you can't. Correct types for on toggle on details element. So now you can actually use it. Don't override $destroy, $set, $on instance method in dev mode. So these were the instance method that you could use in Svelte 4. And I think, so basically we are overriding those methods to tell you that you can't use them anymore and you need to use something different. But it was creating a problem with custom renderers. As usual, sorry, if I'm not mistaken. Fix unskip branches of earlier batches after commit. So after one of the batch has been committed, the branches that were created before were now unskipped. So like those branches now actually run after an earlier batch is committed. Now, this is one of the mind-bending things. Never set derived.v inside fork. Now, derived.v, basically like whenever like bot a derived and I guess also the sources, so like either a signal, so like a state variable or a derived, the object that Svelte creates has a .v, which stands for the actual value of the derived or the signal, and we use this to store the value so that we can then read the value when you do $get, for example, and when you do $set, we set this value and then we invoke the dependencies, right? Now, the problem here was that probably like setting the value of a derived inside a fork, how a derived work is a bit weird because if the value is the same, you don't have to rerun the dependencies, everything that depends on that derived. And so setting the value inside a fork can be problematic because if you are setting the value inside a fork and then outside of the fork, the value of that derived changes once again to the same value, it can prevent like the reactivity from spreading. I think there's multiple PR that try to fix this. I hope that this should be from Simon. No, it's from Rich. Which like it is like one of the annoying bits of forking, and that's why now in SvelteKit you have to opt in to forking because it was creating a bit of a problem. Skip rebase logic in non-async mode. So rebasing should be in sync mode. Render effects are executed during traversing the effect tree. And when flash sync is called during that, it can cause the timing of things getting out of sync, such that you end up wanting to rebase another branch, which is never needed in sync mode. So this is something that it's important in a sync mode, but it's never needed in sync mode. And so like before, it was like it could have happened in sync mode for some reason, and now we straight up skip that part because you never want to do it in a sync mode. Fix don't reset status of uninitialized derived. I assume that this is still inside fork. So if a new branch is created inside a fork and a derived is read inside the new branch for the first time, it will get reactions, but its true value will stay uninitialized due to the fork. If the fork then commit, it will not change its value because it will not re-execute. There is no effect running after commit telling it to do that, because it was only read inside new effect, which already ran while still inside the fork. So the forking logic is something that is deceptively simple, but it introduces a bunch of side effects, especially around the right. This is almost what like we were I was talking about before. So the point is, inside a fork, what we do is that we execute your code when you fork, and then after the fork finish, before running everything, like before committing anything to the DOM, we revert all the changes. So like you run something and then we revert all the changes and we store the changes inside the like the fork, like a closure, so that when you commit, we then reapply those changes, which is a bit of a like it's very simple at the end of the day, but again, it introduces a bunch of complexity, especially around deriveds, because deriveds are specifically designed to be lazy as possible, so like that they don't rerun more than they need, and in this case it is a bit annoying sometimes. Okay, we have we have a new release 2 hours ago. Ensure proper HMR updates for dynamic component. I've seen the code for this, and this is basically making sure that the anchor inside the dynamic component is also stored inside the HMR way of doing things, so that you can then reattach to that anchor inside the dynamic component. Correctly calculate const blockers. So in a sync mode, once again, I'm sorry guys. When you have a promise, let me show you. Oh, come on. Okay. So when you have a promise, let's say that you do const x is equal await promise.resolve, right? Now, this in normal JavaScript will technically block, right? So if I have console.log here, hey, this will technically block, right? But if you take a look at the code, I mean, yeah, in this case it is blocking because it's what you expect. But let's remove this. The point is, this will technically block the whole code to build your template, right? Because if you take a look, we basically have this code here, and then we have this await promise.resolve. Now, what is the problem with this? Is that if you have this template, you want this template to execute as soon as possible, right? And this means that, let's say that you have this, I think I can have wait, like this is waiting 1000 milliseconds here, and maybe we can even have another one. right? This seems to wait 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it seems to actually wait. Well, I guess, yeah, because obviously those are not derived, so you would expect these to actually run in parallel. So let me try to do this. Like, instead of doing this, I will await them in the template, right? So I have 3 new promises, and I can do await x, await xx, and await xxx. So now I'm awaiting these 3 things, and you would expect the output to be the same, right? Because you are still awaiting 3 things in parallel. But we don't do that, and we actually await all of them in parallel, basically. And the reason for that, the reason why we can't do that, is that we are not, like, everything that is not waiting on this promise is not, like, basically we are not waiting at the moment. No, that's not the right example, sorry. So let's say that I do this and I do this. The point is, like, you see that these promises how can I show you this? It's so annoying. One, two. I'm trying to think of a way, of a good example, of this. But basically the point is that you see here, we are basically saying, okay, this piece of text needs to wait on these 3 promises before it can actually render. And we are basically calculating the blockers. So we are analyzing the code and we are saying, okay, this piece of code needs to wait for this promise, but this piece of code doesn't need. So yeah, okay, that's okay. I get now, maybe I can show you. But the point is, let's say that you have a component that is waiting on this x here, and then there is another component that is not waiting on that x. You want to start to run the second component as soon as possible. You don't want to wait for that. And so basically what we do is that we can see that the first component needs x and the second don't. And so we await when we are rendering the component, not when we are actually, like, not here, basically. And so this is basically calculating all the blockers, and that's the same thing that it was doing wrong inside the const blocks, and now it is not. Freeze derived once their containing effect are destroyed. This basically means that if you create a derived inside an effect and then that effect is destroyed, that derived does not update anymore because there's no more effect that can clean up that derived, basically. Defer error boundary rendering in forks. So the error boundary now, it's not rendering when you are inside a fork, which makes sense because if you are inside a fork, you don't need to render it immediately. Avoid false positive for reactivity loss warning. Once again, like I think this is what Lorenzo was talking about inside, like in this YouTube comment. I think I messed it up. Like let me refresh. Yep. Let me do this. So let me do this. Sorry. And if I launch this, yeah. For the fast fix of the false positive, it was not me, obviously. But yeah, basically, this is probably the bug that was happening. You were receiving an await reactivity loss for something that was not really a reactivity loss. And yeah, there were a couple of false positive for reactivity loss warning, which again, those are warnings that basically we throw to make sure that you don't read a signal after using a wait inside a function, because if you do that, you will not get a dependency on that. So we basically guide you to, please don't do that. Okay, so I think that was it for Svelte. Yep. Let's see, we have 4 new release for SvelteKit. This is a false flag, and I think the reason is that the Antoine detects the security fixes by the fact that it's directly a commit. I'm not sure why this is directly a commit. Probably someone was just annoyed and force pushed. Oh no, maybe it is a security release. It could be a security release. Yeah, it could be a security release. I was not aware of this. Okay, so let's see. We have a pretty chunky release of last week, which was 2.56.0. There are some breaking changes regarding regarding remote functions. So those are not really breaking changes in the sense that it's experimental, so you know what you were looking for. So if you are using remote function in production, you can expect some breaking changes. That's why it's behind an experimental flag. Specifically, we had to rework how client-driven refreshes work. So I think this is important to check, and I'm wondering if, yeah, so basically the point of this was that remote functions basically remote functions basically at the end of the day what they are is endpoints on your website, right? So when you create a remote function, you are exposing an endpoint, and you can call it with a remote function, but nobody tells you that someone else will not call that. So the main problem was that when you do something like this, await my command updates query 1, query 2 with overrides, blah, blah, blah. This is basically telling the server to run the command and then refresh query 1 and query 2 in one round trip. There is no way to design an API that is completely safe, because what this means is that a malicious actor, it could technically craft a package and tell you to refresh all of your queries in your application 20 times. And the server will just take that and run the code to refresh all of that 20 times. And it was in terms of security, it could have led to you executing a bunch of code a bunch of times, which could lead to a denial of service. I'll get to your question in a second. I don't know if I can answer that question. So our original solution was to remove client-driven refreshes entirely, relying on server-driven refreshes, where in the server handle, you have to call query 1, blah, blah, blah. The problem, basically initially the idea was, okay, you can't do client-driven refreshes anymore. You have to call refresh on the server. The problem is when the query accepts some exotic arguments. And so obviously you don't have access to the argument. So what we ended up with is that I'm not sure if this PR is updated in terms of description. So I want to actually go to the Svelte.dev docs because I want to make sure to be as latest as possible for you. So remote function, single flight mutation, I guess. Okay, so let's read the documentation. So when you are doing some mutation on the server, so like either with a form or with a command, you are mutating data, and then you might know that some query should be invalidated for that case. And again, you can basically do this. Like you can say get post refreshes, and by doing this is updating the post inside the command or the form, and then saying, okay, please now refresh the post, get post, so that the client will get the updated information about the post. Now, normally what you would have to do is that you create a post, then you go back to the client, and then the client fetches once again the post. By doing this, the response from the form already contains the value of the post refreshed, and so this means that when you finish this single flight, the get post already know the new value that it has to have. So that's why it's important, because it prevents a round trip, basically. So you can also do something like post ID dot okay. So regarding instead of client requested refreshes, so what this change is that what you can do now is doing something like this. So on the client, you can still do updates, and then you can do two things. You can either pass the whole query without invoking it, and this means please refresh all active instance of get post. So if there is any whatever argument, please refresh it. This means I want to refresh specifically this author Santa, like the get post with this specific filter. And then you can also do stuff like this. But this is not enough. Like before, you could just do this and it worked. Now you also have to accept the updates on the client. So to do so, what you can do is that you can say, you can import requested from app server, and you can pass the get post, like the function that you want to refresh, basically. And you can also pass the second argument, which is the limit. So like, let's say that when you create a post, you know that you can only refresh get post once. So like, you can't have an infinite amount of get post argument, right? So you only want to refresh one, so you can pass a filter. And then what you get the list of arguments that you need to pass to get post to refresh that specific get post. So you can just basically loop over the requested get post and refresh that on the server. So like, this is the bit that you need to add to your remote functions so that the client can refresh from the client, can like pass the arguments from the client where you have them in scope. But you still need to do it on the server, but you can use requested to get the arguments of the post that you need to redirect. And you can also do .refresh all, which is basically the same as looping over the result and calling refresh on all of them. So it's a breaking change because, again, if you were doing something like this and you were not refreshing on the server, you were just invoking the refresh on the client, that's a breaking change. Like you are, I think I lost. So that's a breaking change. There is also another breaking change. This is not really a breaking change, if you ask me. But basically right now, to help caching, we will sort the object keys of your remote function arguments. So if you were for some reason relying on the order of the keys, that's a breaking change for you. That's why we have to mark it as a breaking change. This will help with caching, but yeah, so like if you were relying on the order of the key, please update your code so that it's not relying on the order anymore. There's another breaking change, which is to add the run method to queries. And this allows awaiting queries around outside of render. So before, you could just do await my query inside an event listener, for example. Right now, this is disallowed, so you can't do that anymore. And if you need the value of the query inside an event listener, for example, you can do it with the run operator. So let's go back to the we don't have docs for this. Oh, that's annoying. Run. If we don't have docs for these, we need to add it. Because basically, so first thing first, we are now using Hydratable, which is available in Svelte under the hood for using to use for query. This is good because it means that like a single, like if you remember how Hydratable works, it will fetch on the server and then store that information on the client so that on the client it does not have to fetch again. So basically, you now can't use a query inside a universal load function, inside event handlers, and at the top level of modules. However, you can still use the other methods that don't access the query data. But if you need the data, you can just do query.run, which will return a plain old promise resolving to your data. Let me see, like, it is weird that we don't have docs about it. Let me see. Yeah, it's adding a test. I don't think it's adding any docs. Okay, I need to check this because like we definitely want to have docs around this. So I might add them, or I will like ping Elliot to add it. So let me answer the question, which is not a stupid question. No stupid questions. Let me put here so you can see my face. Status on remote function being removed from experimental. Well, the point is, like, we want to, like, I'm pretty sure that with SvelteKit 3, which like there is already a branch for it, we will remove the experimental flag from remote functions. The point is we want to make sure that like we have everything set in stone so that we can actually remove it. So I'm pretty sure that in SvelteKit 3 we will remove the experimental flag, which should be sooner, like it's shipping up. Okay, so where we were. There is support for TypeScript 6.0, which was released. Isolate command-triggered query refresh failures per query. I have no idea what this means. So prior, you could do this on the client. That's the same. It's pointing to a different PR. So I don't know, maybe it was in the same scope. So probably we already talked about it. Okay, so we have use iteratable for remote function transport. We kind of already hinted at this to that. So now queries are using iteratable. Allow form field to specify a default value. This is my PR, and I actually broke something, I think. But basically, one of the biggest hurdles with remote forms was having a server-side rendered edit form. So just to show you, I think I can show you on my Svelte lab. Yeah, SvelteLab.dev. Let me log in again. So basically one of the biggest hurdle of remote functions forms is the edit form, and which means here it is. So the point is, let's say that you are fetching something from a query, and you also want to have a form that has the old information so that you can edit that information. So this is a very simple, like I can add a name and an age, 37, I can save, and you can see that I have this value here, and I also have like a form that I can edit. So I can say instead of 37, I want 38, and I can send. And now there is still this bug, like this is a problem when you have client-side rendering faults. So like this is like, it was just a normal form submission which reset the form. But if you don't have, like if you are actually rendering with JavaScript, and I need to zoom in a bit probably. So as you can see, I have Paolo 38 and I can do Paolo 39 and I can edit and it works. And if I refresh the page, it's still working, right? So it's still showing the values here. Now you might think this is simple, but it was not simple enough, because what you had to do is you had to do some very annoying things. Specifically, like you had to basically create a derived and then use untrack to do edit.fields.set to set the value of the fields of that edit form to the thing, right? So this was honestly a bit annoying to do, but you had to do it anyway because there was no other way to set a value of an edit form as the default value. And now it's actually a thing. So now what I can do is, instead of doing this, I can do this. I can do editing.for_thing.id. I need to install the latest version of SvelteKit, npm I sveltejs/kit at latest. So now, instead of doing all this dance with untrack, which was a bit of a hack anyway, and edit.fields.set, you can just remove this, and then you do like editing, and then you do editing.field.name as text, and you can always pass a second argument, just like you do with submit, for the default value. So just to show you, basically now I can do ting.text, I think, name, yeah, ting.name, and I can do ting.age. So even for normal fields like text, you can also pass a second argument. So you can do npm run dev. And now this should still basically work in the same way. So I can do Paolo 37, I save, and it doesn't work. I don't know why it doesn't work. I guess it's still running the derived. Let me see. Ting forms is not derived. Oh yeah, because obviously. Okay, so now it's working. Sorry, I was working. So now you can just loop over the things, and then for each thing you do this. And so you can see that now this works. It has this problem because like the form is actually resetting by default. If you want to prevent this right now, you can do this, enhance. Well, you can do enhance, and then you get the submit function, and you invoke the submit function like this. And doing this will not reset the form. So if I do this, basically you are just saying like just submit the form without resetting. So now if I do 39 and I edit, submit is not a function. Oh, because I need to extract it from here. Sorry guys. So I refresh, I do 39, I edit, and now it's working, as you can see. I can do rich here. I edit, and I'm editing this, and as you can see, like this works, and it's basically like a proper edit. Now I think this still has the problem. So if I switch back to client-side rendering false, now this is a normal form, which means that the browser will actually reset the form for you anyway. So if I do 42 and I edit, oh, it's actually working. So maybe let me add Paolo 37, save 34. It is working. I remember there was a problem, so maybe it was fixed. I don't know. But like as you can see now, like this is also working to edit a form and not just to create a new thing. So this is, I think, it was a very important bit that it was missing. We have update JS doc. This is probably just to update the JS doc of some function to give you better documentation. Fit return boolean from submit to indicate submission validity for enhanced form remote function. So this is something that a lot of people were asking for, like before, to basically check the validity of a form submission. You had to submit and then check if there was any issue. But now we also return boolean, so it's easier. Use array type for select field that accept multiple values. Makes sense. Silently 404 Chrome DevTools workspaces request in dev and preview. So this is something that there is a Vite plugin for it. And this is also asked during SV create. So if you do SV create, it will ask you like the JSON DevTools blah plugin blah blah blah. And this is a Vite plugin that basically answer to a specific part. Because if you are on localhost and you open the DevTools, you basically have like Chrome will request this .well-known URL. regardless if you have this plugin or not. And it's basically just a URL that is being requested by Chrome to allow you to edit your code inside the DevTools. Now, before, our solution was just to, hey, if you want, let's add, this plugin that will prevent, like it will actually serve the right thing for Chrome. But now the problem is this plugin is basically unmaintained by Chrome. And so we said, okay, you know what, let's silently like remove like the 404 for this specific request in dev and preview, so that if you are accessing to your website in localhost, you can just fix it. There was a question that I'm not getting, which is, so is this taking ideas from something like Superform and making it native? Is this a trend? Will there be more of it? What are you specifically talking about? If you're talking about remote function and specifically the form remote functions, yeah, obviously we took account of the fact that Superform is a thing. We designed the API keeping in mind that what were the good part of Superform. There were some part that we didn't like and we didn't include. There were some part that we could make better because it's integrated into the framework itself, and we made it better. So yeah, I think if that was your question, yes, obviously, like if you are building a good library and like it's a loved library and like we can make it native into the framework, why not? So that everybody can use it. Okay, so yeah, so yeah, obviously like the vanilla behavior of SvelteKit is improving so that less need to reach for super forms. Yes, that's true, which sucks a bit for which sucks a bit for the creator of Superform. He's a friend of the community, so I think he's well aware of the work that we have been doing. We also asked for like his suggestions, like we also asked like, what do you think about this and stuff like that. At least personally, I did. But yeah, I would say that like obviously like the goal of a framework should be to like give you all the option to use even without reaching for third-party libraries. Not all the option, like there's something that is related to third party, like that is correct, like that a third-party library should implement that functionality because it's too niche maybe, but form handling is definitely something in the ballpark of the framework itself. Okay, so fix config kit CSP directive trusted types required Svelte trusted HTML and SvelteKit trusted URL when a service worker is automatically registered if it is configured. So this is just something that like since Svelte is using this trusted type, we need to include it in the CSP directives by default. Like we need to at least warn you when you are not adding it. Avoid inline dynamic import ignored with code splitting warning when using vit8. Okay, so it was a warning for vit8 that now it's not throwing anymore. Re-implement tree shaking non-dynamic pre-rendered remote function. So now if there is a non-dynamic pre-rendered remote function, so it's something that is not like dynamically pre-rendered and it's not used, it will be tree shaken, which is good. Yesterday was also released, so better validation for redirect inputs enforce body size limit on chunked request. So that if there is a body size limit, like the chunked request also follow this. Use default values as fallbacks. This was one of the bugs that I introduced with the edit, like the field as type, because basically after my changes, if you were passing a default value as the second argument, and then you were setting the form to a different value, so we're doing form.field.set something, this was still having precedence, which was not correct. Relax form typings typings for union types. Okay, that's it. We have a new release of Svelte.js open code, which I don't know if it's the right release. So you see that I released this 1 hour ago. That's what I was working on before. Basically, the problem is OpenCode now uses Node instead of Bun to install this. And Bun was able to, if you do import file.js and the file was a TS file, it was working. Node, it does not. So if you have a TypeScript file, you can read it with Node, you can execute it with Node, but you can't import a TS file with a .js extension. So now I've changed this, but I think it's still not working because I think they made a few other breaking changes in the plugin API. So as soon as we finish, I'll try to fix it and then publish a new version, probably. Let's see, we have 4 new release of SvelteUtils. So we presented this last week, so now I can finally talk about it. SvelteUtils is the utils package that you can use to build the utils. Basically, this will help you build your own community add-on. So if you build a community add-on, you can use SvelteUtils to have all these utils, like to build the dependency, to add, to read the dependency, only the build dependency. It's a bunch of stuff that, the community add-ons are now experimental. Basically, the point is, rewatch last week where Jean went over how to create an add-on, and you can create an add-on that basically adds your library to SvelteKit in an integrated way, and then you can just tell your users, if you're using it in a SvelteKit project, that just do sv add at mylibrary./sv, and it will work. So we have also 4 new release of SV, which are, those are basically repeated, I think, from SvelteUtils. Bump all templates to use Vite8, that's nice. Bump all templates to use TypeScript 6, bump default version, simplify runes option, auto-install Playwright browser via prepare script. So this is something that it was a bit annoying to do. Like when you install Playwright, you also have to remember to pm Playwright install. And now we added a prepare script so that whenever you install, after you install, it will also install the browsers for you. Community add-ons are now experimental, so you can actually create them. Those are basically a bunch of stuff from the SvelteUtils that is basically leaked into the SV changelog. Use check flag from Wrangler types. Deprecated file warnings no longer trigger on object spread. We have a new release of ESWrap. Make TypeScript ESLint types an optional peer dependency. Print is also used in non-TypeScript context. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, okay. So print can also be used when there is no TypeScript ESLint types. And so make it an optional peer dependency means that it will not error out if you are using it in something that is not using TypeScript. There are 2 new releases of devalue. Use native alternatives to encode and decode base64. Add data view support. Again, devalue is the library to basically like it is basically a way to JSON.stringify but better. So like you can now JSON.stringify a float 16 array or a data view or a typed array slice. Yeah. Fix handle regexes consistently in an eval value and reference format. Okay. And I guess that was it. It was a long one today. A lot of changes, which is nice. Go play with it and have fun and report any bugs. And now I will be back to the OpenCode plugin to see if you actually need to fix it. So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for stick with me, and I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed your time here, and I'll see you guys next Friday. Bye.